Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to this week's edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Tanya Schrum, and we are joined by Arts and Features Editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, and of course, our California Local Journalism Fellow, Kelby McIntosh. Welcome to you both.
How you doing, Tanya?
Welcome.
I am doing well, and I hope everybody survived the heat over the weekend. Now
Just barely.
Cruising back to regular Humboldt weather in this fog today.
Yeah, I hope, I always feel bad when I see people on the street who got excited and took out all their summer stuff, and then it shifts back and you're standing there shivering in a sundress.
Exactly.
I see you. I feel your struggle.
Yeah, Monday I had shorts on and went, what am I doing? It's time to put those jeans and the hoodie back on. Well, Kelby, will you go ahead and take us through what's going on this week's cover story?
Yeah, so this week's cover story, we're getting into the ballots for November. It's a lot of things that's happening, and I just wanted to kind of dive into it and not get too far in the weeds with everything, but still give some very educational information, because one of the things that I've learned as a transplant to California is that I didn't know that California was one of 26 states that not only have the referendum process, but they also have initiative processes and sometimes in aspects of both. And so for voters who are going to be looking at the ballots to understand, you might see a lot of these things on the November ballot. Some actually might be contesting each other. So you might see one for one thing, and then another for contesting that subject. But just to simplify things, depending upon how the vote goes, just know that one will be accepted, one will be rejected. So there's no need to kind of dedicate so much mental power into figuring out how that process goes, because it's purely one or the other more than anything else. And just for educational purposes, for those going out there and trying to look up this information, definitely for referendums, if you're curious to understand how that process works, that is definitely more power into you as a voter more than anything else. Now there are some limitations to that power, because there are referendums that might have urgency status. So though you have the power to reject or accept that, those kinds of things take precedence and sometimes might supersede the vote of the voters, depending upon what it is and the urgency of it. Whereas initiatives are more common, but both things actually require the same signature percentage, which is eight signatures in order for passing and all that kind of stuff. One of the things that really stood out to me, just kind of glancing over all the ballot information of what's going to be on November, there's a lot, but for those who are working the hourly wage, just know that you have a raise coming up, because on the November ballot, there is a change to raise it up from $16 to $18 for the minimum wage cap. Now, I know fast food workers get $20, and people in the medical field get $25, but those changes don't happen until October 15th. But if you are working in a job where the minimum wage is $16, just know you can go out there and vote to make sure you get an increase to $18. I love anything that deals with the raise of money for myself. So yeah, be out there looking for that. Another thing that I thought was really interesting that jumped out to me was Prop 6, which was the limitation of forced labor within prisons. That I didn't.
And it's a fallback from an old California statute that just finally needs to get trimmed.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Exactly. It's one of the last few kind of remnants of slavery, and when it comes to this type of labor used in prison, it's actually a lot of corporate companies tend to rely on this kind of labor a lot of times. I don't want to be dropping names, but major tech companies has used prison labor to make cell phones, as well as so many other industries, from bullet making to you name it, have looked to prison labor as a means of cutting costs and overhead to supply their products and everything else. So, like, to see this on the board, it's
time.
Yeah, it's time. It's time.
It's
past time. Exactly. Thank you so much. Also, too, speaking of changing outdated languages and nipping things, there's also Prop 3, which is the changing of language for same-sex couples to get married. And that is changing it from the standard of what held in the language from man and woman to changing it to where it's more all-inclusive, more than anything else. And it's a referendum that took place, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 2008. So these are some of the ones that pointed out to me that just really stood out. There's so many more, such as like one that also stood out was the access to make it easier for counties to have access to funds for for affordable housing, which is really good, especially in an area like our county, which has seen its own housing issues and is trying to do better about trying to improve it and everything else. So that's always a good sign. But definitely, for sure, in the cover story, you can get more detail about what ballots are on November's board, as well as a history of the state when it comes to these processes, as well as in-depth education on what these processes are, what it takes for these processes to get passed, what's your power in terms of the voting process, and just more awareness to what's coming up as things progress closer towards the voting process in November.
Thank you, Kelby. Yes, it was run from Cal Matters, and I encourage everybody to pick up this week's copy and read it. Start educating yourself for November.
I gotta say, I really appreciate these coming out, because as a person who has, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I have gone into a booth before with like not enough information and figured, oh, I'll just read the summaries. And no, the summaries are not enough.
No, as a California voter, you have to do your homework every time.
When I lived in other places, it was really, truly not this complex, because there weren't all of these, initiatives coming up, and it's not with this volume, this frequency, and wow. So you do need to work to keep up, and Cal Matters has done a great job of condensing everything in a way that will really make it a more practical and convenient process.
Well, before we shift over to what's cooking, Kelby, could you also highlight the news story that Thad provided for us in this week's journal?
I sure can. And I think this is a very cool testament that the tax man is a coming. If there's anything my granny says, there's 3 things that are very sure in life. It's the status of your name, is that you will leave this world, and that taxes will always exist more than anything else. And in this story, it is very prevalent that taxes is coming up on the rise, especially in cities like Fortuna, and now joining us like Arcata and just Humboldt County in general. It's very common nowadays for local residents to see a rise in their gas bill, utilities as a whole. And even for myself, I've done a story on the Fortuna water taxes just in recent. And it's because of this. I think what I would definitely want the readers to know and understand is that with something like this, it is a balancing act when it comes to the taxes, because especially when it comes to infrastructure purposes, a lot of these things are fundamental for infrastructure. And though they might not have, like places like Fortuna, for instance, might have not risen taxes in a while, so certain utilities can stay at a rate of comfortable affordability, they've also worried about dipping into like city funds in order to make sure these services stay in act. But now it's seeing detrimental effects by not raising taxes. It's causing infrastructure crunches. And with that story in particular, you see it the crunch looks in the form of not being able to hold employees or retain employees. It's very seamless. Say, for instance, the police force, where a lot of officers are leaving for greener pastures because they're given better compensation in other neighboring cities around Fortuna and things to that nature.
Well, and it's cool that the story kind of ties in with us discussing the ballot measures this week. It's also what is also going to come to our local elections, and that's the need for the revenue stream to increase because the county governments are affected by inflation just like we are.
Right. Because I love what Council Member Mike Johnson said, is that we can't tax our way out of these situations. Like, though this is the biggest thing that is on the forefront, it's still bringing into question other forms of infrastructures and stabilities needed to just make a very cohesively ran system that works for all residents as well as the city government when it comes to operation of the city. So the city, like some of these cities understand that these rates are raising, but they also too understand that it's coming from a standpoint of they've never had raised it before up until now. For residents who are definitely feeling the crunch of this, places like Fortuna says it's a temporary period more than anything else. It's not something that's long standing. So there is some kind of ray of light at the end of the tunnel, but hopefully a lot of these taxation raises will help balance out the books so cities cannot plunge themselves into crisis over these kinds of issues of being in deficit by millions and millions of dollars.
Well, and I think it all ties into the services that we were discussing in even last week, having these difficulties retaining different services that all of these communities desperately need to not be in a crisis, such as their city officers and the fire departments, and all of that ties in.
Correct. More so than anything, these things are part of the structure that helps to not only ensure that residents get their utilities, they're able to not have to worry about like having to shut off one sink so you can run the shower hot at the top of, in another room. But also, as you highlighted too, Tanya, just making sure that fire departments have the resources they need so they can continue to help the city, as well as police departments and everything else. It seems like one domino, just kind of the outlier in a row of different things, but that domino impacts so much stuff. And so definitely, as readers of the journal, as watchers of the preview, like, educate yourself not only on these matters for yourself locally, but also to get out there and educate yourself on the ballots and things that's going on for November for your vote, because all this stuff matters and it ties in together.
Including one of the things that I thought was also a proper highlight was that we can't let the roads fall into ill repair in case of a natural disaster. I mean, it all ties together. And so if a tax hike is on the ballot, these are things we have to consider. So with that, I think it's time to shift to filling our bellies with better thoughts than taxes.
Okay, I have healing news coming to you.
Heal us.
For those of you who have, if you've been through, if you live in or if you've been through Garberville in the past few years, you have enjoyed, I'm sure, Il Forno Bakery and Cafe that's down there. I really love their cannoli. They're so good. Joy, joy, joy. They have moved a little further north for those of us who are not quite in Soham. Fortuna. How did Fortuna get Il Forno? They are named after the goddess of fortune, so that makes, I guess, a little sense. But Fortuna now is home to a branch of Il Forno. They're still keeping their Garberville branch. And I went and tried a few sort of highlight items. Somebody told me, well, I went there because somebody told me to have the chai donut. The chai donut was not in on the day that I went, but I am not mad because the lemon poppy seed one was there. Just a real quick sidebar. Lemon and donuts go together so well. And I'm not just talking about the lemon filled, no shade on the lemon filled, but I don't know if you've had the Franz packaged lemon glazed donut. We're big fans here in the newsroom. This is so much better. This blows the Franz lemon donut out of the water because it is a fluffy, soft, yeast raised donut that, you know, you pull it apart and it's like, it stretches like cheese almost. And it has a thick layer of lemon glaze. I know you've had that experience where you bite into a glazed item and it's just like the sad thin layer, but this is like frosting on a cake and it's so lemony, juicy, like summer joy on a donut. Cheers. Well played, Il Forno. I also really love their very messy, I refer to it as a messy queen, the almond croissant that just is powdered sugar and almond pieces and flakes of buttery croissant, and expect to wear it, but wear it with pride. I see you and I support you as you walk down the street covered in powdered sugar. I get it. It's not the 80s. Everybody knows it's powdered sugar. Also, the peanut butter and jelly cake. That was another thing that I had that was astounding, but also very, very heavy and good. It's a big old, it's like daring you. It's a big old wedge of peanut butter frosting on a very brownie, fudgy chocolate cake, and then with strawberry jam, which is the correct jam for peanut butter and jelly. Fight me. My DMs are open. All those things are great. Go down there and check it out. I'm very happy that it's just a little bit closer, but not so close to my office that I will be, you know, unconscious in the middle of the day after eating a slice of peanut butter and jelly cake every day. Also good news for those of you who are, you know, I get it. When Jaffe's closed, there was a great rending of tie-dye throughout Arcata. But okay, Jaffe's is not coming back. I'm sorry. And for all of you people who keep emailing me, I don't have the recipe for the curry chicken soup. I don't have it. If I had it, I would share it with you for a price. However,
the soup's in the wardrobe. The soup
right?
recipes
I would be running such a black market business on soup. But Obento, you may have tried Obento at, I had them first at an Oyster Fest where they made an amazing oyster okonomiyaki. Obento does casual Japanese food. So like, you know, really simple, homey kinds of things like rice bowls and things like that. And they're a big hit on campus at the depot where all the youngs go to get their lunches. And they're reasonably priced, homey Japanese food. And Maya Matsumoto told me that they are moving into the Jaffe's spot. So Jaffe's was very much a place where people could get cheap meals. And Obento is looking to keep that tradition going, but with kind of traditional Japanese homey home style stuff, a little bit of a modern twist. So like takeout stuff like sushi boxes and little boxes with rice bowls that are warm that you can grab and go. Also some eat-in stuff. They make some lovely katsu. They make all kinds of like I said, the homey things. She mentioned that they kind of they're inspired for this shop by Family Mart, which there's a few Family Marts around the States, but they're a big chain in Japan, basically like 7-Eleven. And convenience stores in Japan have lots of food that are just great. Like I ate in a convenience store all the time when I lived there. And I am very excited that she's going to also be having Japanese drinks and snacks for you to have while you are. Yes, I know Kelby is down for some Japanese snacks. And yeah, it's kind of exciting because she's hoping to bring that same kind of the appeal that the shop has had at the depot to people who are, working, grabbing lunch, etc. Because up until now, it's been pretty much the domain of students. They started during COVID, they did delivery and takeout and stuff out of the Arcata Foodworks kitchen. But this will be on top of the depot location. This will be something that is, for folks living in Arcata or, working there to grab something for lunch, make it quick. And as she put it, a place you can go to a couple of times a week without blowing your budget.
I think that's marvelous. And although we will continue to pour one out for Jaffe's, it's nice to know there will be a new place to get some inexpensive lunch there and continue that tradition of inexpensive lunch that not only the students but all the residents of Northtown can appreciate.
Right on.
Right on. Well, Jennifer, you filled our bellies. Why don't you talk about what could fill our senses?
Well, it depends. If you are a person, this is a very specialized niche market. I reviewed a movie this week because John Bennett selfishly has taken time for himself to travel. And I reviewed the movie Maxine, and it's Maxine with 3 X's, which is your clue that it is a crazy slasher that touches on Hollywood and the porn industry. And there's at one point a cookie jar full of cocaine. It's a wild, wild movie. And I realize that slashers are not typically for me and not for everyone, but this one is really different and interesting, and I think will lead to a lot of discussion. I don't know if it succeeds in subverting the genre, but it's an interesting follow-up to its predecessors in the genre and also to its series, which is the movie X and then the follow-up Pearl. And Mia Goth, eyebrowless Mia Goth, is really cutting herself a place in the slasher genre, the horror genre in general. So horror fans out there, I would love to know what you think about it.
Excellent. And not safe for work. So
no, don't bring the kids.
Don't bring the kids. Well, thank you. I'm going to definitely look out for that. Maxine with multiple X's. Well, I think that wraps up our time for this week. The current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands. Pick up your copy today, read it cover to cover, maybe sitting in Northtown at one of these lovely spots. You can also, of course, find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for being with us and staying informed and supportive of California and our North Coast community.